Yeah, like Amie said this morning, we've raised 5 children. We don't have any what you call formal training, but we have like in the field, on the job training. And we've made our share of mistakes, and we've also seen how the Lord's blessed our efforts as well. And He's faithful to do that. But we're just going to share maybe 40, 45 minutes, but it's very open. If you have comments, by all means, chime in. And then we'll reserve a little bit of time at the end for some question and answer.
Feel free to pull up a chair for both of you.
Yeah, I have one here. You might want, I don't know if you want to stand, but she's going to do the majority of the speaking, and I'll chime in here and there. So.
All right, well, let's start with prayer, shall we? Father in heaven, Lord, it is a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for our Oakwood Church family, that we are able to meet each one. Lord, for the kindness that they've shown us, and I just pray that you would please bless our time together. Lord, it is a privilege to be a part of the family of God and to be a blessing to children and to families of all stages and ages. And I just pray that you would please be with our time together, that it would be productive, but most of all that it would be led by you, Lord. We just ask for your Holy Spirit to be here with us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So, this quote from Adventist Home, how many of you guys have the book Adventist Home? Okay, have you read the book Adventist Home?
Yes.
So good. So good. Here's the cool thing about today, though. You don't have to read it. You can listen to it. You know, you have audio.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, your commute back and forth to work or whatever, it is so worth it. Adventist Home, one of the opening paragraphs of the book says, society is composed of families, and is what the heads of families make it. Out of the heart are the issues of life, and the heart of the community, of the church, and of the nation is the household.
That's right.
The well-being of society, the success of the church, the prosperity of the nation depend upon home and justice. And I don't know what you guys see when you look around your society, but it's a mess, isn't it? We have seen a huge degeneration in our families. And it happened back in the day when we had 2-parent work home life that began, and where more people were not together as a family. Originally, we were like together, right? You lived on a farm, you had grandma and grandpa down the road, you worked together as a family to be able to make it work. And today we don't have that. So now, Tommy, who's 17, can't really do anything because mom and dad are both at work, even though he has muscles that are bulging and desiring to do work, right, Tom? Flex those muscles, right? A lot of kids Tommy's age don't have the ability to do anything. They're in an apartment building, you know what I'm saying? They don't have parents home, and so they're left to try to find entertainment of their own to be able to keep going. And it's part of what we're facing as a family. A family is a team. We work together, we play together, we share each other's dreams and burdens, we're there for each other. And here's the beautiful thing about being part of the family of God, is that we're there cooperatively together. So no matter what ages our kids are, or if we don't even have kids at home anymore, we still have the privilege of being able to be a blessing to others, right? To other families in our church. God would have families the symbol of a family in heaven. Let the parents and children bear this in mind every day, relating themselves to one another as members of the family of God. Then their lives will be of such a character as to give the world an object lesson of what families who love God and keep His commandments may be. Christ will be glorified, His peace and grace and love will pervade the family circle like a precious perfume. Now I told you guys I was the middle of 5. And my parents early, before I was born, became Adventists. And they had to learn from ground zero. They did not come with a toolbox full of parenting tools. My dad came from a fairly dysfunctional family with alcoholism and all of that sort of thing. My mom's was a little bit better. Her parents were chain smokers, but back in the 50s, that was not a thing. Right. You know, it wasn't a health thing. You didn't know anything about it back then. So, but her mom stayed home and raised the kids, and her dad went to work. But it was, so they had more of a wholesome upbringing than what my dad did, but neither of them had great skills as parents. They didn't come with that sort of thing. But when they became members of the Adventist Church welcomed them. And there was a couple of older couples who really helped work to shape my parents and help them to understand. They learned about taking care of your children medically, too. There was a lady there who knew a lot about herbs. My mom was so elated to be able to know. One of us was allergic to the antibiotic, penicillin. So you have this big rash, right? For the cold, you now try to get rid of your kid, now you're fighting a rash too. And this lady said, oh honey, if you just give her this to drink and you do this and you feed them like this, then they'll do better. She taught her how to do things for earaches and all this sort of stuff that now was my heritage that was passed on to my kids. We've hardly ever had to be to the doctor because we knew how to eat, right? We were instructed that by spirit of prophecy and those sort of things. We know what things are good for us and all of those things. So it was a huge blessing because the church family took my family in and they taught us how to be a family. You know, one of the things that sometimes we do as a family though is that we kind of just coast through. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you ever done a trip where you just really didn't make any plans at all?
No.
Okay, sometimes it turns out okay, right? We had a 25th anniversary trip that we did. Now, the year was 2020. So, you guys all know what that was like, that year of 2020. Everything was shut down, right? So our plan had been that we were going to do the Lake Superior tour. We wanted to go all the way around, all the way through Canada. Well, Canada was shut down, we couldn't do that. So what we decided to do was improvise, but we didn't have a plan. We spent our first night in the back of our Jeep, sleeping. It was not very comfy. Let me tell you.
But not, I don't know.
We
really what you get.
Yeah, exactly.
We were missing the plan. And when we got far enough west, what we didn't realize is it became very rural. So the little dots on the map had no place to stay anymore, right? So then we're trying to find a campground and it's like midnight, you know what I mean? It was just because we didn't have a plan. But sometimes with our families and the things that are most important, we don't make a plan. What is our goal? What do we want for our children? What do we want to see for our church family? What is the picture that we want it to look like? With our kids, it was really important to us that they love the Lord, right? That was like the most important thing. We want our children to love the Lord. We want them to be missionaries for Him. Those were high goals for us. But if you sit down together and you plan, God is able to do things and He's able to direct you. But here's the other thing. Is sometimes we make the plan at the beginning. We write Adventist home, we do all these things, and then you get caught up in the current of life. Right. And life takes you, and you kind of ditch the plan because you're just flowing with whatever craziness is happening in your world, right? And we forget to reevaluate the plan. And as our kids grow, it's helpful for us to sit down and reevaluate. Okay, now what do we want to do? Now we have Tommy. He's our only one left, right? What do we want for Tommy? His picture, his world looks different than what Tyler's did. Yeah. Tyler was the top of the ball, and so he had all the siblings below him. But now what does the plan look like for Tommy? What do we want for him? How can we help him? What can we do to make him be the best he can be?
By the way, Tommy, you can play the sympathy card. I'm all alone. I think you should help me with this. All my siblings are gone.
I can't remember what culture it was, but they were saying it's the youngest that gets all the inheritance.
Well, it says the last shall be first and the first shall be last, right?
You know, somebody had told me just recently, I'm so glad I did not know this before, so those of you with young children, I'm sorry, but you only have 17 summers.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden, it like came to life for me. I'm like, ooh, 17 summers, that's all you get. Do you really want to just waste the summer like doing whatever? Like make it count. Put some things in there that are going to make it special. You only have 17 summers.
And that's optimistic, I would say.
That is true.
That is exceptionally optimistic. Some of our children, if they go away to boarding academies, that's kind of a lot of it is kids, because things take them other places. When they get up to those, 16, 17, they are starting those young adult years and they are gone a lot. So.
It's true. So what do you want that to look like? That's the picture.
It's really those formidable years where that planning is so foundationally important. Those formidable years. 0 to 8 is optimistic because they've already developed so much by the time they're 8 years old. And I know there's been times where we've had some difficulties with, I'm thinking of one of our children, and he was 20 years old, and it's like, we had our shot, and that aspect didn't work. In this particular area, you have that time with them to build that into them there comes a time when they need to start making decisions for themselves. And then we have to recognize where we're at on that timeline and say, we instilled this at a young age. These are the decisions they're making. We can't relate with them the same way we did when they were 8.
That's right.
It's a different world now. They're becoming adults. We need to respect their choice and their ability to make decisions, and kindly and gently make suggestions to go the other way. But the day that you can just say, do that, is gone.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way anymore. Now, if you want to ostracize your children from you, do that.
Right.
Because, now they're at that place where they say, hey, I don't need this. I was just talking to a young man here who was telling me that. And I know there's two sides. I've been around long enough to know that there's two sides there. But the way that we interact, the way that we lead and guide and direct, changes dramatically through the years, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but this was something that was kind of an aha moment for me when, no, you can't just say, I want you to do this and I want you to do it this way. I had my shot with them. Now we need to go to kind of like a plan B, how to continue to foster that relationship and build and inspire them and motivate them to go more this other way rather than direction see them heading.
And I think a lot of it, some of us that are here are grandparents at this point, so we're getting our second chance.
Sure.
Or our first chance for some of us, right? To make sure we're getting it right this time.
That's why it's important to reevaluate the plan.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you can continue doing something that worked when they were 8, but you continue doing the same thing, but now they're 14.
Right.
And what worked when they were 8 isn't going to work the same at 14. So you need to reevaluate, come back together. When our kids were younger, we reevaluated about once a month. We would kind of sit back down, we talk to each other and be like, okay, how is this going? Like, what's happening? We like to do walks together, and we would brainstorm together, but not everybody has a partner. Some of us are single parenting and those sort of things, and God is always our partner. We always have the Lord. You can always count on Him. He's going to give you wisdom. He's going to give you direction. That verse in Romans where it says where sin abounds, grace abounds more, it's not for us to make poor decisions. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking about if we find ourselves in a more challenging situation, God's grace is there more for us than those who don't need it because they're not in that same challenging situation. So if you've lost a spouse or you're raising grandchildren or whatever your story is, we have a Heavenly Father who has promised to give us wisdom. But make the plan. Make the plan. What is important to you? Pray and seek counsel from God's Word. Prioritize the things that are most important. For us, we wanted our kids to know the joy of service. We also love music. We always have. He loves to sing. I love to play the piano. It was just a part of our life. The kids would sing with us when they were little. But then one day we came home when the kids were getting to be that Tyler was old enough to drive. We came home one day and we walk in the door and they're all sitting there playing instruments. They had gone to Guitar Center and they had come home. Jared had bought a banjo and Curtis had gotten a bass guitar and we had a guitar. I had this little cheesy guitar that the kids had kind of practiced on, and they had decided they wanted to learn it themselves. YouTube came into play for Jared and he figured out how to do the banjo. How fun! But we would do family worship. Family worship was a great opportunity to do the music, and so the kids would play for us. One time we were singing, I think it was Leaning on the Everlasting Arms, and Curtis was strumming away over there, and his pick flew out of his hand, flew up into the air off the string, and landed inside his guitar. I mean, like, what are the chances of that? We were dying laughing as he's shaking the pick out of his guitar, you know? But super fun things, but those are the things that you have to evaluate and ask yourself. Are we making the goals that we want for our kids? The memories. We love to take them on trips and do stuff. We do things cheap. We don't have a lot of money. We lived on one income. I didn't work for 24 or 25 years. So I stayed home with the kids. He didn't make a ton of money either because we were in ministry. And so we did things cheaper. We would do camping trips. We did the Boundary Waters. We did little road trips. We would go with him places. So if he worked somewhere far away, then we would go with him. We had a library card in every state that we went to. We had one in Proctor, Vermont. We had one in Soldotna, Alaska. We've seen some cool stuff because we traveled there. We went with Dad. We did the road trips. It was funny because one year we went all the way from Alaska, came home for 2 weeks, and then drove all the way to Mexico. You guys know that that's like almost 5,000 miles.
South of the Gulf.
Yes, it was a forever long trip. I think we almost ruined the kids on road trips.
What was the vehicle you drove?
It was a Ford Excursion.
Okay.
7.3 liter
Wow.
It was a big
diesel. We
one.
call it the school bus.
Oh, man.
We needed a big car, that way we could push the kids as far as they could.
But we have such happy memories of those trips. I mean, Tom, remember they were playing dentist. Somebody had a loose tooth. I don't remember who it was. But I think it was Jared, maybe. They had it rigged up where they had a yarn going from one door handle all the way across the room to the other door handle attached to the kid's tooth, where the kid on the opposite side of the car could try to give it a jerk. They did not get the tooth out that way, but it was very entertaining.
That's hilarious.
Oh man,
That's a long trip.
we knew every bush, every flora and fauna along the way because we did plenty of bathroom stops. Let me tell you. One of the things we talked about though is family worship. Family worship is a very important part of any family, but it's an important part for your church family too. To come together for prayer meeting, if you guys do a Vespers, social being together is super important, especially for those of us who don't have close family. So like Katie was saying, you're her family. So when she gets together with you guys, it feels good. And we have to remember that.
Special. Yeah. She gives you a hug. It's a hug. It's a family hug.
You know, one aspect that I think in a lot of places has kind of fallen by the wayside, certainly when you look at yesterday, it's the time of social.
Yeah.
I mean,
Church social.
Church socials.
Yeah.
Certainly, there's a huge aspect to inreach in your church social. Also outreach, right? I mean, that's why we do programming. But man, I see churches today, and just coming out of my last district, I have an idea of what that looked like from that church social side of things. And there was a day when they would get together and they'd play softball, and they would have everybody would bring some food and just spend time together. And today, in a lot of cases, people are just too busy for those kinds of activities, and we're suffering from it. We're paying the price for it. I encourage those social times. Certainly, prayer, worship service and Sabbath school and prayer meetings and all of these things, but make sure to plan for those social times too. When we can just be, outside of, I call it business time, really. It's like business. I mean, you can go to the office and work with somebody, and it's not the same as meeting somebody and going golfing with them. It's not the same. It's like business. When you walk into this building, you put that on. It's like business now. But when you can step outside and into the playground or the golf course or whatever it might be, I mean, maybe the tougher egg to crack in my congregation, if I know he's fishing, I'm fishing too. So that's where it's at. That's where it's at. I'm not going to win him from the pulpit, but if I can let him catch a bigger walleye than me, then we're in business. You know what I'm saying? Just spend that time with the family.
I actually saw something this morning when you said that. It says that a dad is always okay with his son being better than he was.
Yes.
And I really loved that when I saw that. I was like, it's so true. Because a dad will never complain that his son is better than him. Because it's what you want.
It's really important, you guys, to take that time together, to be a family. The other thing is, what type of an atmosphere does your home have? What type of atmosphere does your church have? When we come into your church, do we feel like we're a part? Do we feel like we're wanted? Does it feel like we're welcome?
I'm just sorry to interject.
Yeah.
I felt very welcome here this morning. So thank you.
Yes, it's a wonderful thing. What about your home? When someone comes to your home, you know that people aren't necessarily looking at your decor. You know that, right? They came to see you. They came to see who you are. And it's amazing the places. You guys know it's true. Have you ever seen somebody who may be really handsome or really beautiful, but when you get to know them, you're like, whoa, not so much, right? Just not general interest. Or somebody who, when you first met them, maybe they seemed a little homely or a little, whatever. But then you get to know them, and it's like, this is the most beautiful person I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? Exterior beauty is very superficial. I was the middle of 5, and we were a rambunctious 5. We were not sitting there doing nothing, I can tell you. And our bedrooms were usually upstairs in the houses that we lived in. And my parents were always having people over. And I remember one time, this couple, they had no children. They were getting ready to leave our home. And they told my parents, you guys have the most beautiful home. Our home, my mom is not an interior designer.
No, not at all.
She is not. It's clean. It's simple. But you know what I mean? It was not a designed home. The throw pillars were not just so. The rug was not just so. As a matter of fact, we had chipboard floors. Just so you guys know. The house, we built it, and it never was finished as long as we lived there. So I'm just saying, it was not that. But you know, they left that place and they said, you have the most beautiful, peaceful home we've ever been in.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking to myself, our house? Because our house was so filled with loud noise. You know, we were talking and laughing and playing and whatever and fighting sometimes.
It's the sound
right?
of love.
But it was the peace of love. We had no TV. There was no radio blaring. You could tell that we loved each other. Even in our controversy, you could tell that we loved each other. It was not perfect, but it was a home that had love. And I just want to encourage you guys, your place does not have to be perfect either. Have people come in, have them be a part, have them come over. It's an important part of a church family too, is that we're a part of one another. We're a part of one another.
Does it have to be a lot of work?
It does not have to be a lot of work. I think that too. I mean, so many times when we would have, like I told you guys, we'd have like 30 people over. Oftentimes, we would have the big bags of chips, and we'd do a big crock pot of beans, and then we'd have haystacks. But if we ran out of lettuce or tomatoes or something like that, you always had beans and chips. Nobody started. You know what the cool thing is that everyone loved it, because it's not about the food.
Right.
It's about the fellowship with the food. So we would do popcorn and smoothies, or popcorn and frozen fruit. And sometimes it was just popcorn, because we didn't have enough frozen fruit for everybody. So it didn't have to be expensive either, but it was
The
very
spur of the
fun.
moment can take a lot of the heat off.
It can.
Because everybody knows it
I tried a
was,
lot with my wife, she just won't go.
it was just a last minute thought, and everybody knows that you weren't planning on it, and it's like, it is what it is, and the Lord blesses.
I do want to say, you have to remember that not everyone came from the same household. We came from two very different homes. And his home never had anyone over it.
I respect her, right?
Yeah, I know. So it was more challenging for him to have people all over at our house, especially when we were first together, because he wasn't raised that way. But he liked having people over too, and because I was good with it and I was doing all the food and whatever, then it was okay, right? But it does take an adjustment period. It would be harder to have those roles reversed. I would have to say, if he was the one who was outgoing and I was raised in a home where that was not a part of my upbringing, it would be much harder because I would feel like everything had to be perfect. But I didn't grow up where everything had to be perfect, so I was good with it. I'm just like, whatever, I don't care. It's like Tyler inviting the neighbors over for the pie that we never even tried before. I'm like, okay. But that was the way I was raised, and so I didn't feel like I had to have everything just so. I recognized the true value is being together. But it is more challenging if that's not how you were raised. It does make it different. It makes it different. But you can do things like meet everyone at the park. Or you can have, like, if it's uncomfortable for her to be, have people in her own home, to do something somewhere else, or to help plan a church social, or do something like that, and start in those ways.
Easy, unacceptable.
One of the things, too, that makes life so much better is a menu plan. I don't know how you guys are with that. I am not a planner. I'm a very impulsive person. But menu planning makes my life so much easier because I know I have certain ingredients on hand. So let's say Jared and Beth come, and they have a group of that. You head into Battle Creek to Adventist Village, right? And they call and be like, hey, would you be all right if we just stopped by Saturday night right on our way back? I know mentally in my mind, okay, we have 2 pounds of popcorn. I know I can probably feed that many, right? I'm like already mentally preparing. I'm going through my cabinet right now thinking, okay, what do I have? And if I have certain things on hand, then I know I can do it. You know what I mean? Even if it's just something, and we don't have to have food. You don't have to have food. You can just have fellowship. Kids like to know what to expect too. Even when they're little, if they know what things are coming next, if they know when they wake up it's family worship time, right? And they know after that it's going to be breakfast, and they know after that your day goes so much smoother. Even the structure, even for your granddaughter, when she knows what to expect every time, way easier. For those of us who are not as organized, it's harder. You have to work harder at being organized because it's not a natural thing. But organization makes it so much easier. One of the things that we had in our home was what we call the chore chart. It's so funny. I wish I would have brought it. I have saved it. And on the chore chart, it was a plate within a plate, because it was how my dad did it. My dad had a plate, and we turned the wheel and added.
Paper plate.
We knew what was expected. So Martha's had a magnet, a rare earth magnet in the middle of it, a super strong magnet, and you would just spin it. And on the back of it, one of our friends that came over has written on the back of it, Wheel of Torture. But this is the cool thing, because every day when the kids did their chores, the bathrooms were clean, the house was generally picked up, the floors were done, the kitchen was clean, and that sort of stuff. So everything had like a general thing that was done. Laundry was constantly being thrown in. So that was part of the daily chores. It didn't take us that long to do it. And everybody always knew what their job was. Now, occasionally we had arguments as to whether the chart had been already turned or not turned, depending on what chore was the least desirable. I can't remember which one did we liked general pickup. That was the good one. What was the one that we didn't like? Kitchen?
Floors is bad, depending on the house.
Yeah, floors and kitchen, I think, were the two undesirables of the deal, because they took a little bit longer sometimes. But the chore chart made it solved mysteries, right?
You know, he's got a big smile on his face. I think he might be missing.
Are you missing the chore chart?
One way to get back at your siblings, you just sit them
It would be Tommy every day.
Oh, man. Here's the funny thing, though. Even the younger ones, when they couldn't even read the chore chart yet, they knew what it was based on the position of what those things were for Pierre and the older siblings. So they knew what their spot was. And so let's say you had Tommy, who is 5. He obviously can't do the same job that Tyler can do at 12, but Tommy's turn came in for kitchen too. And so we would have to assist Tommy on some of the things, but for the most part, Tommy just did the kitchen. He could load the dishwasher, he could put things away. Now, I'm not super particular. So if something got broke, now if they were careless, that's one thing. But if they just accidentally dropped something, I mean, it's just a dish, whatever, right? We had a saying, and it was, we just can't have nice things. That was pretty much our saying. It rolled through our life. We knew as a kids we're gonna hurt stuff, right? It's just kind of part of it when you're raising kids. So we just can't have nice things. That was it.
I would have them just eat off the dish, right?
Right, that's right. That's right. So in 2 Thessalonians it says, for even when we were with you, we commanded you this: if anyone will not work, neither shall he eat. And that was kind of, we worked together, we played together. No working, no eating. My dad's line worked for us too. We worked together to make that happen. So, it's your turn.
Yeah, in that work, it was important to make it fun. I mean, it's possible to make it fun.
That's right.
And encouraging, you know, in the work, I relate it to, you know, when you get a lot of snow and you have the snow that you need to remove, and I could go out with my shovel and remove that snow rather quickly. But I want my kids to learn what it means to remove the snow. So it would take longer. And it was actually, you know how it is, it takes you more work to get the same thing done when you're training other people how to do it. But once you get them trained in, it's golden, kind of thing. And on so many different levels as well. Not only does the job get done, but they learn how to do it, and they reap the benefit and the satisfaction of seeing a job well done.
Yes.
I remember as a youngster, and you know, hearing my dad call me. He would call me in several different ways. Sometimes it was like with this happy, cheerful tone, which you didn't hear that a whole lot. And then sometimes it was like this intermediate tone, and then it was this "you're dead" tone. You know what I mean? This is somewhat of an intermediate tone. That's the tone that says, I think every kid knows it, that tone that says, "Where are you? You need to be here because I have something I need you to do" tone. Not, "Hey, let's go get some ice cream," and not, "you're dead." It's, "I have something for you to do." And it was Sunday, and my cousin lived down the road, and we had plans. We were going to play basketball, and we were going to play some golf, and it was going to be a Sunday. Maybe fishing, and it was this tone that said, I'm your father, about to ruin your day, kind of tone. And I came around the garage, and he said, "See this wood?" He had a load of wood dropped off. You couldn't even see the floor in the garage.
Oh, man.
And he said, "I want this wood stacked along the side of the garage." So you had to move half the pile of wood over just to begin to start stacking.
Oh.
And he was a strong disciplinarian, very strong. And he had high expectations. And he said, "You know, I've taught you how to correctly stack wood. So it's not just a stacking of any old stack." There's a way to correctly stack wood so it fits together nicely, almost like a puzzle. And when I come home tonight, I look forward to seeing how you did. And he was gone. And, oh man, it just ruined my whole Sunday, right? And I had a choice to make. You know, I can try to do it with a cheerful attitude and I'll probably get done faster. Or I can be miserable. And the job won't be very nice and I certainly won't have a good day. And he would always say, doing wood, that'll, give you big muscles and all this kind of stuff. Trying to motivate you, And I'm like,
Go for it.
But anyways, I had that aha moment. I said, I'm just going to try it. I'm going to be happy. I'm going to whistle or whatever. And when I bend down to pick up the wood, I'm going to do it. So I'm doing squats with the extra weight. And then on my way to the wood pile, I'm going to curl each piece and all this stuff. And before I knew it, doing that, it was done. And he came home that night, and even as hard as he was so many times, he was always sure to come back around and make sure. He did go and look at it. And then he would come back around and he'd say, pat you on the back and say, well done. I couldn't have done it better myself. Thank you for doing that, kind of thing. So even though he had, definitely some rough edges, there was something that, to make sure that he would come back around and express himself and express his love and appreciation and those kinds of things. And I think in line with work and tasks and chores, to voice words of affirmation to those involved, those who are asked to complete a task. And that's not just in home, I think in our churches as well. This is one area where we may fall down. I've seen it, where it's just expected. This is what we do, and as a pastor, I would every Sabbath, I tell you, I would intentionally, and I would walk down through the duties of those jobs that are being filled. Of course, I wouldn't cover everyone every Sabbath, but I'd make sure I cover a couple every Sabbath. The person who does your bulletin secretary. Appreciate that person publicly. And those words of affirmation, that's building this team atmosphere that she was talking about earlier. And now it's not just, even as husbands and wives and whatnot, we can be about the monotony of every day, day in and day out, and begin to feel like nobody even cares. Nobody even notices. I remember my mom coming to me one time, and she was just livid. And I couldn't figure her out. I'm like, what gives? And she says, I cook your food, I do your laundry, I do all this stuff. And there's never any words of appreciation for this. Right? We tend to take some things for granted that we've always had. And words of affirmation, words of appreciation, something that I think can, if we're not careful, fall by the wayside. Also, there's goal-oriented things that we can do as well. But like when we get this done, let's go do this. Let's do this together. That's very motivating as well. Just make sure that you can actually follow through with, because that will end up doing more damage than good. Say, once you get this done, then we'll go do this. And then it's like, oh, well, I didn't know it was going to take that long. Sorry, we're not going to be able to do that. Shoot yourself in the foot. Doesn't work.
And you don't want to use it as a threat, too. You can use things like that almost as a threatening way. Like you can say, if you don't clean your room, we're not going to the park. Or you can say, hey, when you get done cleaning your room, we'll go to the park. Like one way, who wants to clean their room if you're threatened into it? So you're already initiating rebellion, just in the way you word things. So, and you don't want to bribe them either. Oh, if you do this really good, then we'll get to do that. Like nobody likes that either because you feel like you're manipulated. Nobody wants to be manipulated. But if there's a natural consequence for something, okay, cool. Like, okay, we're gonna go play. The kids knew that we were gonna go get ice cream after prayer meeting or whatever. We tried to make certain things extra special.
I'll send it to
We
you.
wanted the kids to love it.
My little granddaughter knows how to manipulate.
I should have did it on YouTube, but you get
Yeah.
more views initially on
It's
here.
true. So you want to be the one, and in your church family too. Nobody wants to be manipulated in church either. They don't want to be taken for granted. They don't want to be manipulated. Nobody wants to feel like they have to do something.
I just want to say that we're at quarter two.
I know.
I just want to say this about this was probably one of the most beneficial things that I learned as a parent. in lines with my relationship with my children. And every once in a while, and I would include myself as a child. I didn't recognize it in myself then, but I certainly did as we were raising children. Maybe a child would start acting in a rebellious way, acting up, in where we would sit down and say, "What is the matter with this person?
Right.
Why are they acting this way?"
Out of character.
And I believe it was the Lord that showed this to me, and it was this. You weren't spending enough time with that child. I know that sounds super simple. When you have 5 children, it's different than to get together all together as a family and spend time together. There's a difference between that and me spending time with Jared one-on-one. If Jared's struggling, or in the way that's manifesting itself is through rebellion. Doesn't want to listen to you. He has a bad attitude. Every time you ask him to do something, he's going to kick a fuss and all of these kinds of things. The cure for that was to recognize I am not spending enough time with that child. And I'm telling you, it was just like clockwork. I would make my plan to spend time with him, and it was gone, dissolved, like overnight. So many times, I think, as parents, we can find ourselves in this rut where, well, our kids, I don't know what's the matter with them. Well, I do. I cook the food for them. I do their laundry. I do all these things, right? It's like, it doesn't work. There's no words of appreciation. There's no time together. These kinds of things, we start to be taken for granted, or a child can start to feel like they're not being heard, like nobody understands me, nobody cares, kinds of things. And so to recognize it for what it is and spend that one-on-one time with them, I'm not talking about weeks on end. I'm saying, hey, why don't we do something together tomorrow night? And it would take care of itself after that.
Just simple things.
That's right.
Simple things. I know I want to have time for question and answers. So I'm just going to breeze through just some of the basics things here. One of the things that worked well for us is practice. To remember that discipline is not about a punishment. It's not like you're just training them, right? You're wanting to teach them how to do something. So it's not about, okay, so you did bad, now you need to have something bad happen to you. Your point is to teach them how to do it right. And the more positive way you can do that, the better off you're going to be. So a lot of times we have this idea that, okay, they were disrespectful, so now they need X, Y, Z. What they may need is not a punishment. What they may need is more time. So you've got to that's where the prayer comes in. Like, Lord, what can I do? How can I best connect with especially as kids hit those young adult years, they need to start thinking for themselves, and they are starting to think for themselves, but they're confused about where that's taking them. And so when you can instruct them in ways that say, I'm a safe place and I love you unconditionally, now you have a ground to stand on. Practice makes perfect. Carlo did not learn how to play the trumpet like that without practice. And yet, somehow we expect our kids to clean the bathroom because we taught them once. Or to shut the door, right? I mean, I can't even tell you, I thought, man, if there was a buzzer on the door that just said, please shut the door, I wouldn't have to repeat myself all day long, right? The flies are coming in, please shut the door. When the kids were younger, but the truth is that you're going to repeat yourself. That's how it works. It works that way for every training. Practice makes perfect. Efficiency. Sometimes we don't teach our kids to be efficient. It's like they can dawdle through cleaning their room. No room should take an hour and a half to clean it, right? So what do? You have to come up with ways that motivate that kid. Some kids love a timer. I am motivated by a timer personally. I do it for myself still. If I see the kitchen, I'm like, oh my word, this is such a mess. I'm like, okay, let me see how far I am in 15 minutes. Most of the time, I'm done in 15 minutes. It motivates me. I'm not a kid. I'm not trying to be, treat them like they're babies. But a timer does work well. You can do things where you have a race. Okay, Tommy and I love to race. Okay, you do this part, I do this part, so he's done first. We get a whole lot done super fast because I know he's fast. So I've got to be super duper fast in order to be able to cover, or try to give him a little extra. So, but then there's the reward part of it. Like, okay, now we can go do this too. That helps too. I want to cover this really quick, a united front. If you are working with someone, if you have a spouse that you're working with, never, never undermine that spouse in front of your kids. You have got to, if I may not agree with what he's doing, or he may not agree with what I'm saying, And sometimes he'll kick me under the table. Or sometimes he'll run over there. And I'm like, oh my word. He does not say it in front of the kids, but I know he's not appreciating whatever my attitude is at that moment. And usually it's with good reason, right? Even though I'm irritated about it at the time. So we'll go and talk about it. But it's not in front of the kids. And if the kids were to ask him, and he said no, and then they came to me, oh my goodness. That was like, they might as well kiss it goodbye. If you found out about that, they were doing nothing, right? That was not happening.
That's it.
The other thing that can happen a lot of times is it will be like, oh, don't tell mama that I got you this treat. She knows that she doesn't like you having ice cream at 10 o'clock at night. Don't tell mama that we did that. Don't ever make your children think that one parent is not the right one. Or that what they're requiring is ridiculous. Because they're going to think what you're requiring is ridiculous too. Or don't tell daddy that I bought this. Sometimes women are the shoppers. I don't happen to be one, but I know it's a common thing. Don't tell daddy that we bought this. Don't tell daddy that we watched this. Don't, whatever one. Do not ever put each other against each other. Adventist Home puts it this way. Parents are to work together as a unit. There should be no division, but many parents work at cross purposes, and thus children are spoiled by mismanagement. It sometimes happens that the mother and father, one is too indulgent, the other is too severe, and the difference works against good results in the formation of the characters of their children. No harsh force is to be exercised in carrying out reforms, but at the same time, no weak indulgence is to be shown. The mother is not to seek to blind the eyes of the father to the faults of the children, and neither is she to influence them to do those things which the father has forbidden them to do. Not one seed of doubt should the mother plant in her children's minds regard the wisdom of the father's management. She should not by her course of action counteract the work of the father. What happens when you have a non-Adventist parent? Well, it sounds great in an Adventist world, right? Both are Christian, they want the best for their kids, let's not undermine each other. But what do you do when you have one spouse who is not Christian and one spouse who is Christian? You have to do the very best that you can to seek the Lord's will. But you are in a different situation, and that's where it says where sin abounds, grace abounds more. God's going to have to give your children wisdom and discernment because you don't have the same ability to be able to rule your house the way we would together because we're both on the same page. So God will have to give you special wisdom.
And I would say this too, that kids are smart.
That's right.
And they have their own experience. They'll figure it out.
Well, not only that, but to your point about being unequally yoked, that's why the book is called The Adventist Home.
That's right.
Because you understand that there are exceptional circumstances that people are stuck in. And to your comment that kids are smart, I found as we were raising our children that, it's okay to tell your kids you were wrong.
That's right.
Hey, I made a mistake. Will you please forgive me?
That's right.
And when you're willing to do that, your children, they love you all the more because they already knew you were wrong.
That's right.
They already knew you were wrong.
Good point.
But were you man enough or woman enough to tell them that you knew you were wrong too?
Yeah, that's right.
Because that sometimes does happen.
Yeah, it does.
You, like you said, you get irritated.
More
you
than
lose
you
your
like.
temper. You more than you like.
Yeah.
Sometimes you lose your temper. You never had one time where they said, "No, I'm not going to forgive you."
Right.
You would have beat them.
I think that's true, especially too as our kids are growing older, it becomes different the way that we have to parent. You know what I mean? You want them to be responsible adults. You want them to make decisions for themselves, but then if you're constantly micromanaging them, it makes it really hard for them to feel like they can make a good decision. And so there are times when you just have to, or you may make too severe of a punishment. Like, you weren't back when you said you were back, now you can't do X, Y, Z. And you tell your kid that, you may feel like, I've got to live up to that end of the bargain. But if you made a foolish bargain, you are much better off to tell your kid, you know what? I prayed about it and I thought about it last night and I'm super sorry. What you did was wrong, but my consequence was too harsh. What do you think about, and come back together and come up with something that is reasonable. You weren't reasonable and they weren't reasonable. You both made bad decisions. Let's come back together.
Cool.
I think that's an awesome point. You are right. We need to make sure that we have opportunities. Okay. Just the last tip that there's so much on here. I can't believe how fast time goes. Anyway, one of the things that I think was super helpful to us is that we had what we called family council. And so when things would get really crazy or we were just having a hard time together, the kids weren't getting along, he was frustrated, I was frustrated, we would take time where we'd have a family council meeting. And we would discuss ahead of time what we kind of felt like the issue was, And then we would open it up, and the kids could say what they felt like the issue was. And we would open with prayer. He was usually the one who presided. Rarely did I do it when he wasn't home, but sometimes it did have to be done. But usually he was the one who presided, and then we would say what the problem was. What do you guys think we should do? And
I would say this, in conjunction with that, it wasn't always just, the board meeting scenario without any good stuff in there. So we would have like positive things to discuss within those family councils as well. So it wasn't just this kind of a thing, like, oh, everybody's just messing up too much, we need to huddle up here and talk about it. That would be within that time, but surrounding that, maybe there was a vacation or something we needed to decide like that too that was fun. So it wasn't just the doom and gloom kind of, oh, we're going to have a family meeting kind of thing. So it's like that marriage between that two all the way through, all the way through. Just hugely beneficial to intermingle those things like that.
yeah, if we had a family decision to make too, we would do family council as well.
So everyone knew that they were heard, their opinion was respected, and I could vote one way, and they could vote the other, and majority ruled, and we would go that way. So everybody's vote counted, so that everybody was valued.
So before, in pastoral ministry too, you have a call, right? You have a call to your church
It's a pride
district.
killer too.
We would pray about it together.
Family council.
We would talk to our kids, and we would say, what do you guys feel about this? If our kids were unwilling to do that call, we would have had to have considered it a different thing. We would have had to have talked about that. But those were things, they were joint in service with us, and we would share why we felt like it was invaluable, and they would have that opportunity to be able to say, the hardest move we ever did was the one back down here.
I feel the meetings are going now, since there's only one of you.
He's like, we haven't had family council in forever.
All the problem children are gone, right?
The good son.
Well, if we're gonna do question and answer, we probably should call it quits. There's so many good things in here, but we would need more than.
We really hit some of the foundational type things, and the Lord continues to reveal things to us, and we're all in this growth process, just trying to grow ourselves up to be like Him, and then bring our kids along the way. So it's a process.
Do you have that stuff on missafamily.org?
I don't, but I can email you or no.
Oh, you have a
That
website?
would be great.
We do have a website.
Oh, what is it?
It's mistofamily.org.
How do you spell
MISDA.
Okay.
.org. Mistofamily.
It's based in Michigan SDA.
Yep, Michigan SDA.
I think in child guidance, wife says it's never too late. It can be done wrong.
That's right.
That's a book I'm going to read soon, Child Guidance.
It is a really good. It is true. And God promises to give us wisdom. So all of our circumstances are different. But go ahead.
Can we ask you a question?
Yeah.
Okay. I want your opinion on. So, a lot of times parents have been through trauma on different levels, and a lot of times in Christian homes that's not talked about a lot, and a lot of times parents will parent out of that trauma, right? So, how do you deal with? What is your knowledge on that? Because I know that mental health and what happens with individuals, and then when they have children, and sometimes you can lead off of trauma and not realize that's what you're doing. But for myself, I've been really studying the last about 6 months on trauma, how it affects, because I had my own issues growing up as a child with my parents, and a lot of times my parents did things. Why did they do things? What was happening with them? And I really started to hone in on, why am I the way I am? Why did I experience this, and why do I parent this way? Is it the best thing for me to be doing? But I realized that a lot of the stuff that I was doing was because of what I was influenced by some of the things my parents did negatively, right? And no matter what I tried to do, this thing was in me, and I'm just like, what is this, So what do you think about that, and how can parents kind of, because traumas are so huge with a lot of people, and a lot of times people have suggestions, but what happens if a parent is or you're not together on the same page with parenting, how do you operate in that space? If a lot of times parents are operating that way in their trauma or what has happened to them in their past. You know.
Yeah, that's a big question, especially as time goes on. We see more and more of that.
Yeah.
And I know I've spoken a little bit about the way I was raised, and there were a lot of things that I can look back and say, yeah, that was done right, and then, no, that wasn't done right, and I don't want to be that father.
Yeah.
And yet there's this ingrained, kind of like what I'm hearing you say, it's ingrained, like even in some mannerisms. So I find myself like, oh, my dad would do that, kind of thing. But there was an aspect to his life that I wanted nothing to do with. And you know, there's everything in life presents you with an opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
And you can learn that that's something you want to do, and you can also learn that that's something you don't want to do. And I think in my case, I learned a lot more of the things that I didn't want than the things that I did. And the Lord brought people through my life that showed me the things that I did want, and really how to attain that. How to overcome myself and those ingrained tendencies or trauma. I had a lot of trauma as a kid.
Yeah.
A lot of trauma. My parents were, when he's recording this, my parents were great parents. There were things there. We had a lot of issues with broken homes.
Yeah.
A lot of issues with broken homes. Not much abuse,
That's funny.
to say, but a lot of broken homes, a lot of trauma that way. I remember I just wanted to sleep. I just wanted to sleep all the time because it meant I didn't have to deal with what was going on outside. As a pastor, I've seen a lot of trauma in our families, and I'm thinking of one situation right now where the way that they are choosing to allow their children to interact with other people out of a fear of another kind of abuse is really stunting the growth of their children. They don't realize that. And so now they cause fear to reside in that child. It's good to be cautious and it's good to be careful, but we ought not bring it to the level where we're creating a feeling of fear to be outside of your home because someone might hurt you, kind of thing. Honestly, from my perspective and my own experience, it was, Lord, show me the way that I need to be. I want to be like you. I know that by beholding him, I can be changed into his likeness. And that's where it's at for myself. That's where it's at. And surround yourself with the people that can offer that to you as well.
Yeah.
I just appreciate the question because, you know, I was a first generation convert and came from a highly dysfunctional family as well. And I remember despising my upbringing and going through deep, deep valleys of depression. And then I came to know Christ. My wife and I came to know him together, and we were converted together. And we felt this liberating breaking of that cycle. And for me, it may be different for Jelani, but for me, the early years were the easiest and the most dramatic in terms of incorporating these Christian principles. And you know, you have this, you're newly converted, and my wife and I have three children together, and two of them still are at home. My boys are still at home with me. They're 29 and 25. My daughter's married, and I don't. But as they all approached adulthood, that's when I discovered that I was still my father's son. And as we began to have deeper and deeper contests over authority and over desires and expectations, because, you know, like you said, you shift and you're teaching your children to shift, hey, look, we're a team now. It's not mom and dad doing everything for all 5 of us.
That's right.
You guys are all adults. You're all
Yeah.
living under this roof. And,
Yeah.
and so conflict would increase. And I lost more and more control. And that's when it hit me smack dab in
Hannah?
the face. You are your father's son genetically. And so forgiveness. The willingness to forgive yourself for your failures.
Yeah.
And the willingness to honestly tell your children that, please forgive me. I'm wrestling with these things. It was easy when you guys were younger and you all worshiped the ground I walked on.
Yeah.
Right?
So true.
And it's harder now because you're all people with your big brains, and we have 5 big brain people living in this house. And guess what? I am recognizing that I am still subject to inherited tendencies, nurtured tendencies, and I reproach myself for it. Will you please forgive me? God is still working with me. And they always did. They always did. And it's a healing bond that brings you through those tough challenges. And so, that's, I think, just something. Forgive yourself for when you act like your dad, act like your mom, and tell your kids what your struggle is, because our kids are smart. They're smart. They see it. So I don't know. That's a very good. I wanted to share from my own perspective.
Not to belabor the point here, but a biblical principle here in Romans chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "Therefore, you have no excuse, O man, every one of you who judges, for in passing judgment on another, you condemn yourself, because you, the judge, practice the very same things." So it's easy for us to see in other people and condemn other people because we're guilty. But I think the reciprocal is also the same. That if I'm not able to come to the point where, and again, when you're a teenager and you're looking at all the things your parents did wrong, how they messed you up, and I'll never have kids because I don't want to repeat the same stuff. Some of us never get past that. And if we're not able to forgive our parents, then we are trapped in the cycle of committing the same things. What I found is one of the most powerful things to heal from past hurts and then to leave those things in the past is to get to the point where you can look at your parents, you know their story, and you can say, I really have pity on my mom. You know why? Because she was sexually abused when she was a girl, and because her dad was a violent mess, because her grandma, or because my grandma, her mom never did anything to stand up and protect her. Because my dad's parents had a dysfunctional relationship that I can trace back through the family stories for generations. So I can hold them hostage to experiences in the past, and I can repeat those mistakes in my own family. Or I can allow Jesus to lead me to the point where I can say, you know what? I see that they were set up by the enemy of souls. Right? And they did whatever they did, but I know that in the grand scheme, they didn't mean me any harm. They're broken people. And as we are able to progress in that, then I think we really can, by the grace of God, break the cycle and leave those things in the past where they belong.
It's funny that you say that they were broken people, because I have 2 brothers, and I have a sister and myself. And when they talk about my father, because also dysfunctional family, which is most of us, I think. When they talk about my father and I guess you could say, abuse that happened in our home, I do not see it the same way they did. And I think part of it was because I have forgiven him, because I know that he went through, well, they're Christians too, but I guess I always had forgiven him, and I know the good things that came from him, and I know of his past with his family, and it wasn't, I don't think it's something that we go to say, hey, we want to hurt our children, So I think that, like he said, the forgiveness, knowing and understanding, or you can't understand, why exactly people do what they do, but
I understand.
yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
so we see it differently. My sister still has really strong feelings about that, and
Forgiveness is a powerful tool. It really
Yeah.
is. It is.
Yeah.
It really. It forgiving ourselves and knowing that Christ forgives us too.
Yeah.
It transforms my heart, my life. I mean, I love 1 John 1:9. It's, to me, it's one of those most amazing, because it's not only, if we confess our sins, He's faithful and just to forgive us. I love that part of it. But my favorite part is the last part of that verse. And to cleanse me from all unrighteousness.
That's right.
I mean, He wants to transform our hearts and lives. He promises to help us break whatever cycle. It doesn't matter what we were born into. It doesn't matter our inherited or cultivated tendencies. Jesus is more powerful than that. And that to me is awesome, because it frees us from our past. It doesn't matter what happened to us. It doesn't matter anything. What matters is what we choose from this day forward. That's what Jesus cares about.
That's right.
What is my choice today? Who do I want to be? Who do I want to emulate? It's an awesome thing. We're free. You are not stuck in the trap of where you came from. Jesus wants to make you free. So.
And the best
Any other questions?
honestly, the best thing is too, yesterday is done for. You can never go back.
No.
So even if you did something bad yesterday, you can do something better on the next day and forget about that other thing, because it's not there anymore. You can't go back and change it or whatever. So just focus on now.
From this moment forward, even if it was just a bad morning, you don't even have to let it ruin your whole day.
Right.
From this moment forward,
2 seconds ago is the past.
That's right.
They know you're having a bad day. I said, no, wait a minute. No, just a bad moment.
That's right.
That's right.
That's it. That's right. I'm not taking the whole day. I am not claiming the whole day. Nope.
Just another question. You alluded to earlier when you were saying that as parents, you try to guide their life. Like, do you ever talk to them about their life as far as, because you don't want to pick for them, I get that, but there's subtle ways, I guess, you can kind of steer my daughter, and they're always saying, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. In my mind, I'm like, oh, no, you're not making no money in that. And, you're tending, oh, no, we're not doing that, right? So, I'm trying to think of practical ways to kind of guide them to say, hey, I understand that, but, maybe look at here, or suggest certain things to kind of help them. But I understand the guiding part. Did you ever involve your children in that process of, were you verbal with them as far as trying to guide them to a certain point or direction?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And sometimes it's hard. And he's sitting right here, so he can probably tell you better than I can. When you're thinking about career path and things like this, which I think are not the most important, topics to be talking about. They're important, but, if you're, and I love the arts, artist in my own right in some ways, but if you want to be able to support yourself, you might need to, depending on what, you understand what I'm saying, you might need to select a different kind of route to take. You don't want to be discouraging every time somebody brings something up, right? So it's kind of a fine line.
Yeah.
And sometimes they kind of have to go down the road a little bit, in my humble opinion, and experience a little bit of what that means.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you mean, when I do this, I'm only going to make this much off this, that kind of thing. It doesn't work very good. Or, but some forethought, especially when you deal with young adults, and you're staring down a marriage here in probably a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, and you can kind of see maybe with a relationship that's developing or something like that. When they start getting into those, whether they have a significant person in their life or not, I'm cognizant of what's ahead.
Yeah.
And I want to, and I can use her, and she can use me, hopefully, to say, this is, you like to do outdoor stuff. This would be an important thing. I'm just using it as an example. It might sound kind of trite, but this is an important thing, that if you want a partner in this kind of thing, you might want to find somebody that's interested in that as well. The Lord brings us together. You understand what I'm saying? I don't want to, but And you can apply that across the board. I remember talking with one of my relatives about a decision that he was making to marry this woman that they would be unequally yoked.
Yeah.
And said, well, you know, she said it's okay if we raise the kids Adventist.
Yeah, I've been
And I
there,
said,
done that.
I respect that, but something changes when they're holding that baby in their arms. That maybe they're not going to be so ready to back up that statement or make good on that statement.
Mm-hmm.
And now things have worked out better than what I ever thought they would. But to see what's coming down the road, that's the time to do it, because now when somebody's tight, and I'm talking again from like just pre-marriage, hands off. That will bite you. Time after time after time, you miss the boat on that one, because now if you want to step in and say, you know what, I don't think that's going to work because of this, this, and this, you might want to think about that bond's probably strong enough that they'll end up getting married, and she'll end up hearing about it at some point, and you won't ever see them, at least not her. So prior to that, I'm taking the opportunity to say, this is why I chose your mother, and the Lord brought us together because, you know, A, B, C, D, these are the important things that you want to be looking for in a potential spouse, these kinds of things. Cover that ground before they're already in the trenches, because once they're in the trenches, it's game over. You lose every time in that. So, and I would just say you can apply that kind of in the other areas as well. You're training up that child. We can't wait to be in the moment to try to steer them left or right. That steering has already had to been implemented and installed.
And you want to have that opportunity to be able to have them want to know your opinion. You know, if you haven't connected with them and whatever, then they're not, if he was never present in their life, and now all of a sudden he wants to come in and tell Tommy what he should do for a career, that's not going to work out so hot. But when Tommy knows that he loves and cares about him, then he's more interested to say, Dad, what do you think about this? And usually the kids will come and ask, you know, what do you think about this? Or I kind of like this girl. What do you think about this girl? You know, and you have opportunity to say, okay, here's some of the things that we think are positive. We don't know her super well, but here's one of the things that maybe something you might want to ask about or find out about, you know? And it gives you access to be able to say those things, because you've been talking about that stuff for a long time, you know? So those are things you want to start working on that stuff a long time ago. And the other thing that is a natural process is that kids are ready to be on their own. So as they get closer to that high school graduation point, they're more anxious for independence. God put that within them so that they would want to start their own family. Yeah, go ahead.
But I know two brothers right now, they're still with their mother. One is 50. Wait, Daryl, he's the youngest of 5. He is 50, he turned 55 in June, and Dana turned 57 in July, and he's still with their mother.
And you know, there's different stories for everyone, but there is a natural process that takes place, and you were talking about that, where they're cantankerous. They're kind of ornery. They don't, it is not intended that they live normal situations. It is not intended that adult children live with their parents.
And it is becoming more and more of a problem and more prevalent in these later days, because kids are staying home longer. You know,
that's true.
So you really have to negotiate new contracts, as you were talking about earlier. You talked about reevaluating the plan. So it's a constant renegotiating of a contract. You know, for me and my 2 boys, you know, it's very peaceful, but there are things that irritate Dad still. You know, it's like, hey guys, you know, could you do these, you know, 3 things for me at least? You know, the common shared spaces, you know, stuff like that. But Adventist home, choosing a life's partner, again, great to just, Tommy, I want you to read these 2 or 3 chapters in section 2 as you start thinking about women in your life. But you ultimately hope that Tommy just naturally gravitates toward a woman who's like his mother, because of the family influence that you've had in your life. And he's going to see he's gonna look for women that have the qualities and the traits of service and kindness and, ministry that my mom had. And that's what you ultimately hope. I try to tell all three of my kids, if you can get through college without getting tied up in a relationship, you'll be way better off.
Right.
Because your life won't be complicated.
Yeah.
My youngest, was 18 and got a girlfriend, and that was a tricky ground to navigate based on all the stuff we talked about. Eventually it dissolved, which was good for everybody. But it was tough because that infatuation kicks in and that kind of desire to make your own decisions at the very same time. And all you can do is prayerfully say, hey, have you considered these potential flags?
Right.
Have you thought about this? Because like you said, you can't be running that person down. If that's the person he's choosing, you can't run that person down.
Yeah.
It's just a wedge.
Yeah, I remember my sister, she made a choice, and she's like 25. She still lives at home, and she wanted to go to Oklahoma with her friend. And the place she was going to was like, okay, you're not living in an actual home. You're living in like a shed-size shack. Like, your water is not really good. You don't really have a lot of food. But this is the choice she wanted to make. And we were trying to like tell her, no, it's probably not. But at the same time, Mom's like, don't tell her no. Just let her, she's 25, let her make her choice. She left, she did it, she came back within a couple months and was like, yeah, this isn't good, I want to come home. She came home. And then she was saying, oh, I think I want to go back again. And I was saying, okay, like, just think about what happened before. And then turns out her friend got kicked off the land they were at, that she was supposed to go to. And I asked her a question, I'm like, so it turns out that probably wasn't a good choice, was it? She was like, no, I'm not going to make choices like that again. So you do have to let them make the choice, and even if it turns out bad, you just have to trust that God is going to be with them and that nothing bad will come upon them.
I think one of the things that's super important too is that our kids recognize that we love them for who they are. You don't have to perform a certain thing in order for me to love you. My love for you is not based upon your behavior. My love for you is based because you're my son, you're my daughter, you're my church family, whatever. I love you because of who you are, not because of what you are. And if that's the way I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm not a perfect mom, and they're gonna make mistakes. They're not perfect kids. My spouse is not a perfect spouse. But if we love each other, we can do anything. And I feel like the most important thing we can do is love the Lord supremely and love our families.
That's right.
We need to engage in those things that build that love.
That's right.
Yeah.
To have that, but especially with our young adult children, they're going to make decisions that we would not prefer, or that we know is going to lead them down a path that is not going to be good. Like, you talk about a sister or whatever. We need to love and respect them anyway.
Yeah.
If they ask our opinion, then give it to them in a gracious way. Not in I can tend to be kind of bossy, like, well, you need to do this, this, and this. And he is much more diplomatic about it. It's much better to be the diplomatic person, Nobody wants to be told what to do, right? And so we want to make sure that we are gracious in dealing with one another. Should we close with prayer?
We should.
We are way over.
Yep.
Sorry, good stuff.
This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll close with prayer, and those of you who want to go can, and if you want to stay and ask questions, you can. Do you want to pray?
Father in heaven, we've enjoyed our time together here today. And Lord, you have poured so many blessings into our lives, relationships, in our marriages, and in our church families, and our immediate families. Lord, for the gift of love. Father, we're just praising you for the way that you are so faithful to reveal yourself to us, to draw us to yourself. And Lord, your promises to change us. And we claim that now. Lord, give us wisdom as we interact and as we work with our children. No matter what the age is, Lord, we just plead with you for wisdom. Lord, we just want to do all that would be in accordance with your will. Father, once again, thank you for the promises that you've given us. Lord, be with us as we so long to have that day come when we're standing before you and you ask where our charges are, to have them surrounding us. And we give you all the praise and the honor and the glory for doing so. Pray that you be with us the remainder of this Sabbath day, and we ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hey, before y'all go, I just want to say thank you to you two.
Absolutely.
Appreciate you both
Yes.
for coming all the way
So
here,
much.
for sharing of your experience, telling some stories, your wisdom, and for Katie, thank you.
Yeah.
Katie is the
Yes.
driving force behind this program today, so thank you, and all of you for
Yes, thank you.
seeing